Hello again, and thank you for joining A Shark's Perspective. Several years ago, I really began focusing on the brands that are people. And I found a great book that I've read a few times that helps differentiate how we look at reputation of brands. Most often, we think about a corporate brand's reputation and all the pieces that shape it. But what about a personal brand? What do people say, and what do you want them to say about you? How do you take control of your reputation before everyone else does? Larry Linne is the author of Brand Aid and also Brand Damage, the CEO of Incite Performance Group, a former NFL player, a microeconomist entrepreneur, and a subject matter expert at helping people and business leaders reach new heights. And on this episode, we'll discuss what a personal brand is and what it isn't, the when, why, and how of developing your personal brand, social media, what you can learn in the NFL and in business, and much, much more. So let's tune in to a personal brand expert with a podcast host who has a reputation of a shark on this episode of A Shark's Perspective. Well, Larry, thank you so much for joining me today on A Shark's Perspective. I'm really looking forward to speaking with you today. So tell us a little bit about your background. What's your career to date in a nutshell?
Well, first of all, thanks,
Absolutely,
Shark,
of
for having
course.
me on. This is going to be a lot of fun, and I look forward to sharing my experiences and hopefully giving some value. My background is extremely complex and diverse, from professional athlete, actually in multiple sports, through business careers, and mostly involved in selling. And if I was to frame my career up, I've owned numerous companies. I've been a leader, CEO of numerous companies, but in every job, the bottom line is I'm in marketing and sales. I convince people I persuade people to buy things that I think are good for them, and hopefully they think are good for them. So right now, I own a few companies in the insurance and risk management space, and that's the field that I happen to be persuading now.
So I knew you played pro football, of course, but you were also a professional athlete in other sports?
Yeah, I could probably make that a really big stretch, but right out of high school, I went and played professional soccer for a very short period of time. Didn't last long. Was a little intimidating for me, but yeah, I did. I played in the NFL. I was one of those guys that got the entry because of the strike back in 1987, but had a coach that was kind enough to keep me on the roster for a full year. Then I played at New England, played at San Diego, played at Dallas. And then since then, I actually have raced bikes professionally in the mountain biking space.
So you played two kinds of football, but at least one of them was for the Cowboys.
That's right.
So what was, give us some insight. Tell us, what was life in the NFL like?
Life in the NFL. My father played in the NFL. He played for the Baltimore Colts. So I came out of a family that knew sports, and it's a multi-generation, three generations of really good athletes. My grandfather played in the first Cotton Bowl, and he played in the second Sugar Bowl, and so a lot of family. So I grew up in that environment, but playing in the NFL is a little bit surreal, to be honest. It's one of those experiences that you you don't realize how big the fandom is until you get there, but then you don't realize how much of a job is as well. It's just a job. You go to work every day, and it's got a little bit of a letdown from that perspective. But then you go to 7-Eleven at night or someplace and walk in, and half the people in there are pointing at you. So it's kind of a surreal experience, and it is truly NFL, not for long. So you got to take advantage of that. And one of the things I've always said, and my father taught me this, was that once you get out of the NFL, you got to make every day of your life one that is greater than your past, and your future always has to be greater than your past. So NFL is a good entry point, but I hope I've done a lot more since the NFL that's more impressive.
So why the interest in personal branding and brand reputation? I mean, what did the NFL teach you, and sort of what inspired you? What was the impetus for all of this? Was there some bad story with another NFL player that we can't talk about?
That could be a 4-hour discussion, which is certainly not what you're looking for. But I'm going to lean it towards where your specialty and where this podcast is driven. And I would tell you that what I learned about personal branding, what I learned about your reputation, everything you do in professional sports is just extremely highlighted. It's like on steroids, no pun intended to it. But everything that happens in a single play or in a single or a game or a season, you can make a career out of business knowledge from that type of stuff. And branding was one of those because uh, your reputation was so highlighted, was so clear to the world around you that everybody's going to brand you and build a reputation and call you whatever they wanted, and they were going to label you. And when I left the NFL, it was my nature to do that. And quite honestly, around me was kind of freaked out about it because I would talk about personal branding back in the 1990s, and they're going, "What the heck is that?" And what's funny is the evolution of it is, I was talking about personal branding to salespeople and to executives and to businesses back in the 90s and early 2000s, and everybody would tell me I'm crazy. And then all of a sudden, the world starts making personal branding one of the hottest topics that exists in the marketing section of the book. So we're that whole evolution for me has been life changing because my kids, my wife, my business, my friends, we are all always talking about our brand, and that really came from managing your reputation when you're in a glass bubble in the NFL.
So, speaking of not for long, it reminds me of the lifespan of a CMO. It's about the same as the lifespan of an NFL running back. I mean, I don't know if you could compare it
Right.
to Emmitt Smith, who had a much longer career, but it's typically the tenure of a CMO and the average lifespan of an NFL running back is about the same, about 2.5 years.
I think they're identical. It's got to be. He might have done a little bit better than that, but yeah, you're and the reality is, it's what have you done for me today, which why those are similar because sales, marketing, professional sports, every day people are starting at zero and asking you how did you perform, and that's another great lesson I guess that sports can bring to us.
Your book is one of my favorites, to be honest. Part of my own career was in recruiting, and that's where I began a focus on marketing and then how people were brands. I read your book when it first came out and then reread it recently, and it's still poignant today.
That's
And
great.
how people talk about brands, your
Mm,
brand when they're not around, just like a corporate brand. And as a pro athlete, you had the spotlight on you. Now it's in marketing and sales, but more now so with the internet, where your reputation indeed matters. In your book, though, you talk about a personal brand being what people think of you when you're not around, and that 78%
yeah.
of decision makers look up salespeople before meeting with them. Even since then, that percentage has most likely grown. So, was that part of the reason for the
Mm.
book to help people look at their own brands? What piqued your interest there?
Yeah, just being in a glass bubble where the world would label you, and that's the problem is people are going to label you with very little interaction. They're gonna put a label on you as fast as possible. Most people that have been in sales, marketing, or business have heard the concept that you have about 8 seconds that somebody's going to make a decision about you when they first meet you, and then they're going to spend the rest of their life trying to prove it. And of course, being in the glass bubble of celebrity status, they're gonna do that from a distance. They're gonna see you from a distance. Well, then all of a sudden, the world of the internet comes along, and a lot more about us becomes a lot more evident and available, and social media and being able to go look people up. All of a sudden, the evolution of that became so again, once again, kind of a hyper steroid that I would go to an audience back in 2009, 2010, and ask CEOs and executives, how many of you are looking online a salesperson before he comes or she comes to a meeting? And it'd be 3 to 5%. And in 2011, 2012, it was 50 to 60%. And by 2014, 2015, I go to a meeting or I go to any place in the world and ask, do you look people up online? Do you check them out? Do you research them before you meet them? And it's typically close to 100% of the room. So we've had a cultural evolution of the things that I thought were important before of managing your reputation. Well, now it's so easy to access a perceived reputation, and as the book says in the subtitle, it's take control of your reputation before everyone else does. we can go out there every day and just hope for the best and let people pick and choose what they want to highlight about us. But the other side of it is the exciting part is what if you did, just come to this conclusion that I'm gonna tell people what I want them to highlight about me. I'm gonna tell them what to think so that I can maximize my relationship and my potential with them. And that's ultimately not only writing the book, but since writing the book, the greatest value is realizing how much control and how much power we have because there's so much out there that we can manipulate, but in a positive way. We can tell the world what to think. Now, I got to tell you one other piece that's kind of interesting in this. I think it's an important part of the story. When we first wrote the book, Patrick Sitkins and myself, the book's name was Brand Damage. And the reason we called it brand damage is the emphasis was on salespeople and business executives that we coach and work with in our consulting businesses. And we were seeing how quick somebody's brand could get damaged, whether it's a DUI that all of a sudden is exposed on the internet whenever somebody googles your name, or saying something stupid or being drunk at an event or something that everybody talks about you. And we saw the power of brands being damaged, but yet the opposite of it is the opportunity to be able to do something positive. Now, the reason it became Brand Aid is because Penguin came to us and they loved the book and they bought it from us, and but they didn't like the negative title, so they changed it to Brand Aid. But I think that's an important part of the story, is realizing we wrote this thing for the purpose of protecting people so that they can not do dumb things, but also take an or advantage of the opportunity.
Then how should someone look at their personal brand? How do we go about forming that
Mm,
story that helps define how people perceive us? I think a lot of people think they're labeled a certain way just because
yes,
it forms that way, but there is a lot that we can control
right,
and help manipulate, if you will. But just like, branding and SEO and
yes,
social media and content, your thought leadership that you put out there. I mean, these are
right,
things that can help form how people label you
right.
when you're not around and not looking and
That's
not
right.
knowing what they're saying about you.
That's correct. And Shark, I tell you what, this is where we can see such great opportunity. So many times people misunderstand Brand Aid, my speeches, my message. They think, oh, I get it. So I got to be careful and manage my social media and my internet presence. Like, well, yeah, that's the media, that's the spot that you do it, but it's the concept that's the most critical aspect. My one of my top advisors that works in one of my consulting companies, she wanted to be well known as a C-suite executive coach, and she's talented, incredibly talented, but her background was in operations. And so all of a sudden, she's going to event after event after event, and she comes back to me. She says, "Larry, I can't get people to realize I'm a great C-suite coach." And I said, "Well, let's think about it. What do you want people to think of you?" "Well, I want them to think C-suite, smart, thought leader." And she listed these things. I said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do. I want you to come up with a few questions or a few references at every networking event you go to, every business environment. I want you to prep by thinking of articles you've read, Harvard Business Review, whatever it is, things that you can go and show your thought leadership and see if you can guide the discussion to where you're not talking about operations, because that's what they're going to bring up, because that's what they know about you. They're going to take control of your reputation. So this is social media, it's networking events, it's our advertising. I think the world of a business executive, and maybe the world of your kids, anybody, we need to be thinking, what is the reputation I want? What will people think of me based on what's out there? What my actions, my words, my topics, the way I dress, and oh, by the way, my social media, so that I can think first and make sure that the right things are out there, so that people will take advantage of the things that I want to highlight in their relationship with me.
So, one of the things you talk about in chapter 9 is personal branding for every age and every stage. Unpack that, if
Right.
you will, and also describe, to you what personal branding is for any age and what it isn't.
Yeah, so personal branding, I'm a simple guy, so I like to keep it simple, and I just go down to the definition of what people think of you, your reputation, or what people think of when they think of you. That's your brand, and whether it's funny, happy, hardworking, always late, uh, you know, whatever the words are that come to mind. And it actually, one of my favorite stories was I was speaking at an event one time, and it was a sales event, a lot of salespeople. And afterwards, this older sales guy comes up to me and he said, "Hey, Larry, I really appreciate your speech." And he said, "I just want to let you know that." Your speech was great for a lot of these young guys, but it really didn't pertain to me. And I said, "Really? Why is that?" And he goes, "Well, because I'm not on the internet. You can't find me anywhere, and I'm not in social media. I mean, you could Google me all you want, you'd never find me." And I go, "Oh, so your brand is that you're not very modern, and you're not very up to speed, and you're not very current, are you?" And he just looked at me with these big eyes, just staring at me, going, "Oh." And so the message is, where unless you live in a cave somewhere that nobody knows you exist, you have a brand. So your brand is whatever your spouse, your kids, your friend, coworkers, whatever they would think of when they think of you, that's your brand.
Couldn't agree more.
Pretty simple answer.
Since you wrote the book, social media and so many of the different sites have matured. LinkedIn, except for engagement, is
It,
still one of my favorite channels in the world, especially for business and how you can form
that's
your own
right.
brand.
That's
But
exactly
what's
right.
really exploded since 2014 is Instagram, and moreover, how people look at influencers, which have always been around, but also at followers and the number of them. How do you look at forming that online presence?
I do the same thing with my kids, with my coworkers, with myself, with my clients. I tell them, you start off by thinking of, in a positive way, in any relationship that you have, what are the things that I would want people to think about me to make sure that this relationship is maximized. So whether it's my best client, that's a relationship. What do I want them to think of me? Do I want them to think of me as a thought leader, as a hard worker, as someone that's very dedicated to my profession? Do I want to think of me as a problem solver? Whatever those items are. But the same thing for my wife. I want to be able to have my wife, when she's talking to her friends, tell them certain things about me. I can help guide that if I start off by saying I want her to think of me as someone that adores her, thinks she's the most wonderful human that exists, that I put her first. And so we start with the list of what you want each relationship to say about you if they were in private talking about you. Then the next thing you do is you ask yourself, what must I do to make sure that that is what they'll say? And it'll actually help you be better at every relationship you're in. I'm a better father. I'm a better husband. I'm a better leader of my company. I'm a better friend. Because about once every 3 months, I go back in all my key relationships. I write down, what do I want them to say about me if they're somewhere else? And again, this is for prospects, clients, in my business. It's any relationship that I'm going to have. Once you've done that, and then you decide what are the things that you have to do to make sure that that is the brand that will be represented, then this is not some kind of a false, insincere manipulation. No, it's absolutely stuff that are your strengths that you want to highlight. And when you go through that, then your behaviors and your actions and your words will represent those items, and they'll think of it. One of the things I do in training with salespeople is, after I've done 2 or 3 classes with a group, I will ask them to write down on a piece of paper what they think of me. And I'll go up and grab a piece of paper and I'll write down my brand items that I want them to think. I'll go put it down on a table upside down. I ask them independently, write down what you think of me. Try to be as nice as you can, but write down what you would tell somebody else about Larry Linne. Well, then I let them all start reading them off, and I write them up on a board, and then I have somebody turn my piece of paper over. It matches. It always matches. And there's a reason why. It's because I know what I want them to think, and I think about how I must act so that they will think that. And lo and behold, the words that I want them to say, it's what I hear. It's very powerful.
So I'm a big proponent of people putting out content to demonstrate what they know, their thought
Mm,
leadership, if you will. But that's also tricky because of things people post. You know, you're a father of daughters, and I'm sure you think of
yes,
what you or they post ahead of time. How do you look at
right.
social media in that regard, and how it can affect someone's personal reputation?
Yeah, well, again, it starts with, for me, it's once a year I decide what I want people to think of me. Once a quarter, I adjust it. Um, and I have a couple of rules. I have a couple of rules. One rule is before you ever hit send, complete, click, finalize, or whatever you do in anything in social media, you pause and you look at it and you say, what will people think of me when they read this? And it's your reputation once again. So sometimes I post things because I get passion around something, or I get excited about something, or I get mad about something, and I put it up and I get ready to hit that send button, and then I look at it and go, you know what? The whole world could see this, and this could be offensive. This could get somebody to think something about me negatively. And sometimes I just don't post because I ask myself the question, what do I want people to think of me? And what will they think before I post? And I will tell you, this is something we've done with our kids. We've taught them from the very beginning. This is how you need to act on social media. This is how you need to, prepare your digital footprint. That anything that goes out there, it's not a small controlled space. Just picture the whole world seeing it because they might, and then think, what's your reputation if you do that? And I have had my kids now, common language is, Dad, did you see so and so? Look at their brand. Look what happened to their brand. And I'm not about to post with my friend posting because that's not gonna you're not gonna mess with my brand. One of my daughters has probably chewed out a half a dozen people before because they've posted stuff with her, and she tells them, Don't mess with my brand. That's my brand." And I love the culture that we've created with our kids and my coworkers, and anybody around me. They realize how valuable brand management is every day, every event.
One of the things that's noticeable to me today
Mhm.
is how we look at the convergence of what used to be for
Oh
people
yeah,
something that they would separate. In chapter 7, you speak about how no brand is an island, your personal brand at work and at home. For
brand
Gens
management.
Y and Z, a large chunk
Right.
of their personal and professional
Yes,
life is out in the open and together. But for Gen X, there's still at least a try for a lot of people where they try to separate church and state, or work and home, if you will, from a privacy standpoint. However, the internet and social media seem to be dictating that convergence at
that's
breakneck
right.
speed. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it goes back to what I was talking about before. When I played in the NFL, you just looked for and made sure the media wasn't around when you did things, and you could somewhat protect yourself by knowing who's around you, because that's what your direct sight was your brand management. And then all of a sudden, we've evolved now to this place where what you and I are talking about right now is being listened to by this little digital box sitting on top of my refrigerator. So I mean, there is no longer there's not an environment anymore where we're not potentially being seen, heard, or observed that could have an impact on what people think of us.
In chapter 6, you talk about brand reputation and something we think about often with corporations, but it's different slightly with people. And I don't just mean from a PR standpoint, but how does someone go about repairing brand damage?
Yeah, I get a lot of those calls actually, and it's interesting you ask that because people will call, and I've had a few this year that are just devastating. Some of the stories that I've heard, and people call and said, "How do I fix it?" And I adhere to the strategy: be quick, be honest, and give your direction of where you're going to go forward. So if I do something that's really stupid, that's really got a bad message, I'm going to be quick. I'm going to get out fast. I'm not going to let it linger and let somebody else interpret it. I'm going to control the dialogue. I'm going to get out there and say, I screwed up. I was wrong. This was bad. I'm going to be quick and I'm going to address it for what it is, and I'm going to be honest, and then I'm going to say exactly what I'm going to do to fix it. And I'm going to get therapy. I'm going to go work on this. I'm going to. I can assure you that this is not who I am, and I will not do it again. And be done with it. And if you take that approach of those quick, honest action items and be done with it, it's amazing how quick people forget, and they'll give you another shot. That's the nice thing, that we live in a world that allows you another shot.
What are some of the life lessons that you've learned that's helped you provide
Yeah.
executive leadership to business leaders and, coaching them and
Mm.
helping people develop and focus on their brands? And, when are you going to write your next book?
Yeah. Oh boy, that's that. Thanks for that question. So the first question is a powerful one, and I years ago came to the conclusion that I really do believe that my purpose of existence on this earth is to serve others and help them accomplish things that they didn't know possible. And that's pretty broad. I mean, to be able to sit and think about how can I help other people do things that they didn't know they could do, they didn't know how well they can do it. So that means potentially their confidence, their skill set, their talents, whatever it might be. And so personal branding for me, the life lesson for me is I can accomplish my purpose when I'm purposeful about my brand, because now people are looking for my strengths that I can bring to them, and they're seeking out the positive in me that allows me to help them be more successful. It works. I think it works for whatever your purpose is, because your strengths are what make you the best of what you are, and it doesn't matter where you apply it, what industry you apply it in. It's who you are, and if you can highlight your strengths and let the world around you play along and focus on those strengths, you won't be misunderstood near as often, and they will lean on those strengths in your relationships, and every relationship will be better if you can do that. Now, when am I going to write another book? Okay, actually, just this last week, I wrote the forward to a book that I think has got the potential of becoming a New York Times bestseller. It's called The Cure, and it's by Seth Denson. And Seth is one of the most amazing, persuading sales guys. He's on most of the big channels, the Fox, the CNNs. He's a healthcare specialist, and so, but he asked me to write the forward in his book. So I've got that forward that's going to be coming out in print here pretty soon. But I have about 8 titles, Shark, and I can't tell you which one I want to do first. But it's probably going to be about 2 years from now. That's my goal. Is 2 years. I'm going to be settled down a little bit in my business, and then I'm going to start focusing. And you're probably going to see 5 or 6 books over the next 10 to 12 years.
So, Larry, you're on a shark's perspective with a guy nicknamed Shark. Prior to the show, we were talking about good places for your family to go do some scuba. But, what's your favorite kind of shark and why?
Oh man, that's awesome.
I don't
So
think you ever would have been asked that on interviews when you were in the NFL.
that is a great question. So I'm going to say that I think it is called a yellow tip. Is that an accurate name of a shark?
Oh, the lemon shark.
It's a lemon shark. You got it. You got it.
They've got two equally sized dorsal fins, and they've got a yellowish to brown to olive type color.
Okay, well, let me just explain why. So the reason why is because I have 5 daughters. One of my daughters is loves sharks, and one of the reasons she fell in love with sharks was when we lived in Fort Myers, Florida. She was going to school, and they did a shark session for one of the semesters, and she had to build a replicate of some kind of a shark. And all I remember is we had to do this paper mache project in our garage, and I was helping her, and I just remember it had this yellow front end to it. And I thought it was a yellow tip, but anyway, it was yellowy front end, but it was kind of a silvery and gray and white through the back, but this yellow front. And I remember how my hands, my clothes, and my garage were all spray painted yellow. And it's one of my greatest memories with my daughter. And now, when she graduates college this next year, she wants to go swim with the sharks, cage dive. But I will never forget the yellow paint all over all of us as we built her first shark that got her interested.
Larry, it's that special time of the show. Are you ready for the 5 most interesting and important questions that you're going to be asked today?
Let's do it.
All right, you've been warned. Here we go. Number 1, the New England Patriots, or the, at least when you played there, the San Diego Chargers, now in LA.
New England Patriots, no doubt.
I think Bill Belichick understands reputation management all too well. Number 2, personal branding or corporate branding.
Wow. Personal branding, because I think corporate brands are now made up more of a group of personal brands, more so than the corporate brand itself.
Number 3, and here's an insurance one for you, term
Mhm.
life or whole life.
The simple answer is term and invest the rest until you reach an older age, and you can use whole life as a more strategic approach.
Number 4, ninja or samurai.
Samurai, no question. I'm a samurai.
Yeah, I took a look at your other companies. I kind of figured you'd say that.
I'm a samurai fanatic. I live by the Bushido principles. I am just blown away at the discipline. And if you got to know me well, you would find everyone around me, my brand is I'm an incredibly disciplined
Oh, I definitely did my homework.
individual. Thank you.
Number 5, and the most important question that you're going to be asked today is biscuits or cornbread.
Oh, baby, cornbread with beans. And I'm gonna show you the southern side of my family. Um, beans and cornbread with ketchup.
Good man. So, Larry, where can people find out more about you, get your thoughts, buy the book, and more?
I tell you the good news is I've been around some wonderful people that have done a great job of branding me. So you can go to Larry Linne and Google me and find just about anything you want. But my insurance site is Incite, INCITEPG.com. And if you want to go to more of the intellectual property, the books, a lot of the things that I'm developing for coaching and developing people, it's that is THEII online.com. So THEIIONLINE.com. And you can see a lot of the stuff I'm doing.
Larry, again, it's been an honor. Thank you so much for being with us today on A Shark's Perspective.
So I appreciate this, and you're doing a great job, and you're a true leader in the marketing space. So thanks for letting me play.
So there was my conversation with Larry Linne, the author of Brand Aid and also Brand Damage, the CEO of Incite Performance Group, a former NFL player, a microeconomist entrepreneur, and a subject matter expert at helping people and business leaders reach new heights. Let's take a look at 3 key takeaways from my conversation with him. First, for a lot of people, they're reluctant to be out there, to be putting out content to help form people's opinions of them. However, let's take it back a step. You should be thinking about it as your personal reputation. Remember that you don't have to declare yourself a subject matter expert in something as many do in that kind of content. But think about it this way, your reputation is being formed whether you put content out there or not. And to a great degree, it's up to you to control it, manipulate it, feed it, and take ownership of it. Larry's book title is spot on, Brand Aid, taking control of your reputation before everyone else does. So unless you truly live off the grid and in a cave, remember that your personal brand and what others are saying about you is being formed whether you help guide the conversation or not. And you shouldn't be like his example of someone who was older and didn't think he had a presence online anywhere and wasn't worried about it. Larry's rebuttal back to him was so that you're saying that your brand isn't very modern and you aren't up to speed. Just be conscious of how you're being labeled because you have a brand and that reputation is being formed whether you take control of it or not. Second, Larry points out extremely well that it's not just social media or the media where your brand should exist. As he said, it's the concept that's most critical. How do you want people to know you? Or what do you want people to think of you? Help guide the conversation with social media, networking events, your family, the advertising, if you will, the way you dress. Think about what you want people to cite and highlight that you want people to remember about you. It's a whole lot more than just the online social media presence that many try to craft. Third, take an inventory every quarter, year, or some type of plan and make a list of your close relationships and think about what you want people to think about you. What do you want those people to say when you're not around, and how can you do a better job of reflecting those values? That doesn't mean manufacturing a false story with insincerity. As he thoughtfully reminded us, this is in no way something fake about your persona. You want to be a good father, mother, husband, wife, business leader, etc. Then do your actions reflect what they say about you and what you want to hear. It should always match. And a rare fourth, and with those actions and how you act in social media, please pause before you hit send or enter for your social rants. Think about your digital footprint. Whatever you write is posted in neon lights. Think before you mess with your own brand. Got a question? Send me an email to kenneth@asharksperspective.com. Thank you for joining us today. Remember, think about your brand because your reputation is important. Just ask Taylor Swift about reputation. Just think about Tay-Tay. She was trying to shake it off. And now look what you made her do. So don't blame me, and join us on the next episode of A Shark's Perspective.